just want to encourage everyone, if you feel comfortable doing so, to turn your camera on. It's just a great way to get a little bit of feedback on how engaged you are. And that way it feels like we're not just talking into a void. So if you don't mind turning your camera on, that would be awesome. And on that note, we were also hoping we could maybe take a picture of everyone tonight before we get started, if you're willing. So if you're willing to just flip your camera on real quick and smile, I'm just going to take a quick screenshot. So I'll give everyone a minute to get flipped on, and then I'll do a countdown and we'll go from there. All right. Okay, everyone feeling ready? All right, 3, 2, 1, smile. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Looks really good. Okay.
I missed it. Take one more.
You want another one? All right, we're doing it again. Get the cameras on. Everyone smiling. All right, 3, 2, 1.
Yay.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for speaking up there, Marion.
You're welcome.
All right. So before I dive into the specifics of how tonight will flow and what the agenda is, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the land and the histories of the people of this land. And I invite you all to join me in this just as kind of a moment of reflection. So as we gather here tonight, our committee in 350 Colorado acknowledge the land of what's now called Colorado, and that it's located on the traditional territories and the ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, Apache, Lakota, Pueblo, and Shoshone nations, amongst others. We also want to acknowledge the 48 contemporary tribal nations historically tied to the lands that we are on tonight, wherever you're calling in from on our state. I also want to recognize that Native peoples continue to remain in relationship to these lands through culture, stewardship, and ceremony. So while they are a very important part of this land's history, they're also a very important part of the future. I just want to encourage everyone to keep that perspective in mind tonight as we're talking about food and agriculture and people, and also in your work and other relationships. So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, how does that look to everyone? Does that look okay?
It looks good. It just went like swiped over for a second, but now it's good.
Okay, does that look good?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So tonight is our action-oriented policy night. Very excited to have you here. On our agenda, we did the welcome. We already got that through. I'm going to then hand it off to the Jessica Isaacs, who's going to guide us through the policy process in Colorado. Then we're going to talk about some current agriculture and food bills that have been going through the General Assembly. Some have passed, some are still in committee. And then we're going to be talking about the Agricultural Workers' Rights Bill. And we are so thrilled to have Fatuma Emmad, who's going to be telling us a little bit about that. I know that there are a lot of questions about the bill. She'll be answering questions. And then we're going to take action on that Agricultural Workers' Rights Bill. So here we go. Let's dive in. I'll hand it off to Jessica.
Thanks, Michaela. Yeah, hi all, I'm Jessica. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a social work grad student at University of Denver, and I've been interning with 350 Colorado for the last few months, especially in the Legislative Action Committee. So before we dive into the rest of the agenda, I wanted to kind of go through a brief run through of the legislative process here in Colorado. So similar to how at the federal level, we have federal senators and representatives in the Congress and DC who are making policies for the entire United States. We also have state senators and representatives who work at the Capitol in Denver who make policies and legislation for the state of Colorado. There are 100 state legislators in total in Colorado. But unlike at the federal level, where policies are made year-round, here in Colorado, the session typically only lasts from January to May, although this year, because of COVID, it's going to likely be extended to about June 12th. So during this short window of time, is when the legislators introduce and vote on bills, and it's also the time where citizens like us have the chance to influence voting decisions by making their voices heard, giving testimony through direct calls and emails, and through media or public demonstrations. So to walk you through at a high level of how bills are made with a little bit more detail than what you might have remembered from Schoolhouse Rock, here we go. This image shows It's actually showing when bills are introduced through the House, but this process is very similar when it's introduced in the Senate. It's just a little flip-flopped. And you can tell which chamber it's introduced in based off of its bill number. So if it starts with HB, that means it's a House bill. If it starts with SB, that means it's a Senate bill. It'll then be followed by 21, the year, and then a number, which is its bill number, and then it'll have a title that we reference it by. So if you can see in this image, this shows it being introduced into the House. And then in the House, the House Speaker, or if it's in the Senate, it'll be the Senate President, will then assign it to a committee or even several committees. In that committee, then that's where the legislators will hear testimony on the bill, and then they'll vote either yes to move it along through the process, no to essentially kill the bill, or they'll make some sort of amendment. So if it gets voted on favorably, it'll then keep moving through the process, maybe through other committees, or it'll come to the entire House or the entire Senate based off which chamber. And it'll be voted on 3 different times across 3 different days. So these are called the readings, where they're on the House floor, the Senate floor, and get voted on. If it passes through all 3 readings, then it goes to the opposite chamber. So the Senate bills go to the House and the House bills go to the Senate. Again, it'll be assigned to committees. Again, it'll go to the floor, where it'll be voted on 3 times again. And if it goes through that entire process, it'll then end up on the governor's desk, and Jared Polis will have the opportunity to sign it into law or to veto it. So I think that's kind of the main thing that we wanted to walk you through. So unless anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to add it in the chat or unmute yourself. And if not, we could move on to the next section.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. All right, so as we mentioned, there were a lot of really important regenerative ag and local food related bills in the Colorado General Assembly this session. So one that is there right now is the Agricultural Soil Health Program, HB 21-1181, and it is currently under consideration. So what this bill would do is it would create a soil health program in Colorado through the Colorado Department of Agriculture, and it would be entirely voluntary. It's a system for monitoring the environmental or economic benefits of soil health practices. It would also create a soil state health inventory and platform, and then also a soil health testing program. It would also create a soil health advisory committee, and this advisory committee would be made up from people around the state, and it'd be responsible for approving grants and making recommendations to the Department of Agriculture to inform the creation and development of the soil health program. So why does this matter? Why is this something that our committee is working on? I know that I'm probably preaching to the choir a little bit, as this is a Regenerative Ag and Local Food Committee, and a lot of you who are on the call tonight are probably way more well-versed in this than I am. But soil is really important because it's living, and the healthier the soil is, the more benefits from it we derive. We're able to have better yields. We see better resistance to climate effects like drought and erosion and flooding. We also know that the current rate of erosion right now is 4.6 tons of soil per acre per year, which means that it's currently eroding at a rate that's 10 times faster than it can be replaced. So doing everything that we can to support and protect soil health is critical for the stability of our food systems. And because Colorado is such a big agricultural producer, it's also really important for the livelihood of our farmers and our economy. And with that, I'm going to, wait, I wanted to say one more thing. The other thing that I was going to say is that this bill is coming up in the Senate appropriations this Friday, and we expect it to move very quickly through the Senate floor. So we'll have a few action items at the end of the call tonight on this, but just want to put it on your radar. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Rebecca.
Thank you, Michaela. My name is Rebecca Stobie. I have also been interning with 350 Colorado for the past few months in the Regenerative Agriculture Local Food Committee. Been having a great time, and I just graduated with my environmental studies degree, so I'm excited to keep doing this work. So I'm just going to go through the next few slides of some more bills that are being voted on currently. This first one is the Create Agricultural Drought and Climate Resilience Office. So it's pretty much said in the title what it does, but it's really important because, especially in Colorado, we definitely see how apparent climate change has been affecting lives and the environment. You know, following 2020's horrible wildfire season, and how many acres burned with that, it's really imperative that we address drought and increase our resilience to climate change. And so this bill would create the Agricultural Drought and Climate Resilience Office. And what that would do is the office would provide technical assistance, incentives, and programs to address Colorado's ability to prepare for and respond to drought or climate-related events. So this would really contribute to our resilience for drought and climate events. And then along with this office, there's also a related bill, which is called the General Fund Transfer Agriculture and Drought Resiliency Bill, and that creates a fund for drought and climate events, addressing the same things as the office, but it just is a one-time transfer of $3 million to fund that. And then next slide, please, Michaela. Another bill that funds resilience is this stimulus funding Department of Agriculture efficiency programs. It is also a one-time transfer of $3 million, but in this case, it goes towards Colorado's renewable energy and energy efficiency program, and that's called Acre 3. And what Acre 3 does is it provides financial and technical assistance and also education to farmers and agricultural processors in Colorado so that they can cut energy costs and support a market for agriculturally derived energy and fuels, which are, you know, renewable, and better that we go towards that than what we have been relying on for the past many years. And then the second part of this bill would also transfer $2 million to conduct voluntary soil health programs. So related to what Michaela was talking about with how important soil is, this bill would also contribute to soil health as well as renewable energy. So those are those bills.
All right. And another really important bill that's almost through its way through the entire process is HB 21-1145. It's a support pollinator special license plate bill. What this bill would do is allow Coloradans to purchase an optional license plate if they make a donation to a qualified charity that either supports pollinator habitat restoration and creation or pollinator education. And having this plate would be like a tangible way for vehicle owners to show support and increase awareness, and also, of course, provide funding for pollinator conservation. This plate, the plate design is kind of fun. It'll be like selected via a design contest where anyone can submit design templates online, and that's a great way to engage the whole artistic community in Colorado. And as a lot of you all know, pollinators, not just bees, but all pollinators are critical for the survival of humans and basically nearly all other living beings. They sustain our ecosystems, produce our food and other natural resources by, of course, helping plants reproduce. So this is really important, and fortunately, it's been voted on favorably and will hopefully be passed into law quite soon. Yeah, I'll pass it to Fatima.
Oh, no, it's me again.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're good. Thanks, Jessica. And thank you, Rebecca. So the last bill that I'm going to talk about before we do pass it over to Fatima is the Deregulate Meat Sales Direct to Consumers. This is SB 21079, and it passed already, and it was actually already signed into law by Governor Polis at the end of last month. I believe it was on the 29th of April. So this legislation essentially makes it easier for consumers to buy meat directly from producers. So now people are able to buy a share of an animal before that animal is slaughtered, and then the producer can distribute the shares directly to the consumer without first having the meat inspected by the USDA. And then the other thing that makes this process a little bit easier and friendlier to that consumer-producer relationship is that if a consumer does get sick, they won't have standing to sue. So this law has been compared to Wyoming's food freedom law, and it's considered a really important step in localizing our food system, and one that I'm personally pretty excited about. So with that, we're now going to be talking about the Agricultural Workers' Rights Bill, and I would love to introduce Fatuma Emmad. Fatima was born in Denver and she was raised in Denver in Ethiopia. She has worked in farming organic and heirloom vegetables on her own acreage as part of a land co-op for immigrant farmers. She's been setting up farms for restaurants, and then she's also worked as a farm manager for multi-acre community farms in both Milwaukee and Denver. Before becoming a farmer, Fatima was a political scientist who engaged in issues affecting farming communities, such as the push for genetically modified seeds across southern and eastern Africa. She believes in resistance by the world's land caretakers to single solutions for crop productivity and seeks to work on reframing ideas of food security. She currently Sustainable Food Policy Council. She serves on the Denver African American Commission, and she is also a 2020 and 2021 Rocky Mountain Farmers Union Fellow. She is the recipient of the Kathy Underhill Inaugural Scholarship, recognizing a community member who is changing hearts and minds in the hunger space with advocacy, policy, and/or community engagement through the lens of health equity. Fatima, we are absolutely thrilled to have you here tonight. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen and you can go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for inviting me this evening, and thanks for that nice introduction, and for valuing my voice and the opportunity to talk to you all a little bit about the Ag Worker Protection Bill, also known as SB 21-087. So let me just share this. Sorry, oops. Let me put this on present. Cool. So just wanted to give you all a little bit of context of who we are and how this bill was a little bit organized. As Michaela said, I'm the executive director of Frontline Farming, a POC-led farming organization and food advocacy group, Food Justice, and we farm our own acreage, 5 acres, and we focus on production as well for our community. So we're farmers first. I also work as a professor at CU in the Masters of Environment and focus on environmental justice. So when the pandemic hit, some of us came together recognizing that no relief would be going to our ag workers. Ag workers are historically excluded from conversations that are about agriculture and usually relegated to conversations about labor or federal policies, and so really get missed as a stakeholder group. They themselves are not allowed to organize in any way, and if they do, can be fired and deal with those kinds of reprisals. So you don't really see any types of kind of organizing groups for them. We also know that during these times, a lot of our immigrant justice groups have really been fighting the deportation machine and serious other things that are happening and haven't been as focused on these ag workers. So I served on the Colorado Farm and Food Systems Rapid Response Team and quickly recognized that they weren't going to do anything for ag workers, and that wasn't their task. And so I convened Project Protect Food Systems and got some awesome people, activists, lawyers, workers to join. It's an open meeting. We now host it once a month on Mondays, the 4th Monday of the month. You're more than welcome to come. Check out our website, projectprotectfoodsystems.org, and you can see all sorts of data we've been collecting and whatnot. We quickly formed groups, one that's focused on data. This issue of ag workers, we're not Florida, we're not California. We could do better by our people, and not knowing who they are and how many makes it this nebulous issue that we're not addressing. It's estimated to be about 50,000 ag workers in Colorado. We worked on organizing a social movements group, a policy group, and then fundraising. I'm kind of the only person on fundraising. It's not the most popular team, but I have another person now, Hunter, and we kick butt. We've been doing good getting funds. Our social movements team went on to start our Promatura network. We recognize that because these communities are hard to reach, which is often an excuse for not doing anything for them or for academia, not including them in research. We recognize that the best way to do that is through navigators, a model that's been established. Promoteurs are people from the community who are trusted. While these communities are largely invisible, they're resilient and they survive through other ways, such as mothers, children, aunts who translate, take them to doctors, things like that. So we launched 75 promotores across the entire state of Colorado and cover 6 regions, bringing vital resources to these communities, including, at first, my biggest concern was PPE. This is life and death situations. While we see in Colorado that communities are facing about 2 out of 5 severe food insecurity in the pandemic, Black and Latinx communities are facing over 52% food insecurity. And ag workers in particular, as Cesar Chavez pointed out long ago, deal with acute hunger. And it's kind of sad that the very people that feed us suffer in those ways. So we distribute about 60,000 pounds of food in a month and go out to all the regions of Colorado. I'm just coming back myself from helping unload. We have some essential guiding principles that we ask people to agree to in coming to the rooms. We're, while I'm a farmer and represent farmers in many different spaces, and I do believe that this bill acts in the interest of all who make up our farming communities, this is particularly about ag workers. And so we're not really trying to have conversations about whether it's valid or not, or how, not exploiting them might harm people's bottom lines. Exploitation is exploitation, and this bill is about basic human rights. So we believe that they are essential and not expendable. We believe that there is no justice without security, that we believe that the protection of worker and environment is good business. We believe in equity and risk and opportunity. We believe in nurturing economies of solidarity and resilience. We are land-based, people-based, and we exist to amplify and elevate the voice of essential workers. So that's a little bit about how we got here, and our policy team kept working to create enduring change. Actually, let me go ahead and show you all this. So, we strongly believe, one of our organizing principles is that the subjugation of farm and food systems workers is structural racism and must be undone. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Essentially, agriculture workers and domestic workers were excluded from the National Labor Relations Act in 1935. And the reason for that was that it was a trade for a New Deal politics. And if you read the laws of that time, obviously we're extremely racist in how it's even written. And those exclusions were created because it was Black people that do that work. So after that, we see kind of Black farmers getting pushed off the land. And then we see us starting to bring people from other countries who have less protections, and not very many at all. So a lot of people have some issue whenever you're talking about racism and structural change, and it gets, people get offended. Like today on the Senate floor, there was a debate about if you include emotional language like that, then other emotional language should be allowed. I do not think that the history of structural racism is a thing of anthropology, sociology, emotions, or all the things that people say to me on a daily level, particularly in dealing with this bill. I think it's a matter of history and facts that we're still living in now. And I think that when we think about the pandemic and how people are dying and how we all tacitly just start kind of like, oh yeah, we knew that people of color were going to get really hit hard by it. We should think about the assumptions that make those things okay and make us even assume that that's what would happen. So we do believe that farm workers should be partners in producing food and fiber. A lot of this is like, even in my work before this bill and finding leverage during this pandemic to finally get the first bill across. It's not so much about representation, it's about epistemology. It's about how we know the things we know. If we're not representing the diversity of voices who really create our food systems, then we're really getting a small understanding of what's really going on in the food system. And as we saw, what happened in the pandemic, does not give us good assurances about how our food system is operating. Food is necessary, workers are essential, protections should be mandatory. I don't want to go on too long. I just want to highlight for you all really quickly perhaps some of the main points of this bill. One of the things this bill demands is collective action for ag workers. It's interesting that ag industry and farmers who actually have their own lobbyists and collective organizing representing themselves in these rooms stand against this for ag workers. Ag workers are not allowed to, more than two of them, get together and even talk about a wage theft situation or anything like that. We believe that they should have minimum wage. The most controversial has been overtime. This has been amended to mostly go to a rulemaking process with strict safeguards that highlight that this was racist exclusions and that don't allow exemptions of just saying like agriculture is so unique. It's important to understand that overtime is created not just about paying people or not, but it was a protection from overworking people, from people working too many hours, which is a problem in safety for a lot of reasons. Pretty simple ones: meal breaks and rest breaks. People should have 10 consecutive minutes. Sometimes operators will break up those breaks and say a minute here, a minute there. They should have access to service providers, people that are H-2A workers, they're contracted, they get hired, and then they're beholden to live, eat, and sleep at that farmer's home. So they're completely under their employer and being able to get food, health, lawyer, anything like that. So we believe they should have access to service providers, of course, when they're not working, right? And then we believe overwork protections are pretty important. This also has gotten changed a little bit, but as you all know, it's just getting hotter and hotter, and people need to have water and rest breaks when we're hitting excessive heat. I want to highlight that only in the United States, as a farmer myself, I don't make my farmers work at the heat of the day. We start really early. We break at, we'll be going to about 1 as soon as it's warming up. And then we have a crew that comes in later after that hot sun kind of moves out. And across the world, you don't see farmers working at the peak of the sun. Only in America do you see that. And that's because that's not their people. And so our interest or care about their bodies and what happens in the futures is not at the height. Enhanced safety and public health emergency. So there's some things about that from what we saw in the pandemic. It's specific to creating more space in a housing unit. Big one is the banning of the short-handled hoe was banned in California in 1975, has been banned in Republican states as well. Also called el brazo del diablo, the devil's hand. It's a tool. People are made to use it almost all day in a field, bent over in a stooped position. There's a lot around that in terms of just its efficiency, but furthermore, that it was never intended for people to be working with something like that. It's been proven in California, for example, that back injuries were reduced by 35%. It causes serious musculoskeletal damage. And it also makes people just bent down, which has a lot of symbolic significance in how that's been used. So we call for the banning of that. We had to redo a little bit of the language to make sure that was clear. Creating an ag worker advisory committee, and then just making sure that people are free from retaliation when they do file any complaints. So that's kind of the short and long of it. We're a great team of different people that come together to make this bill and Project Protect itself. We're volunteers that came to do the work. We raise the funds so that we can pay payroll for all our promotores and get money directly to them. But otherwise, we're volunteers and just got some big funding now to finally allow some sustainability and for me to move on, for it to go on for many more years, funded itself as a bigger nonprofit than even I operate. And so that somebody else can now step in and continue that work that we began with our support in a paid way. So it's a lot that we did in about 15 months. We were very open about the process of the bill. A lot of people have a lot of things that they say about how ag people weren't involved. Sometimes I think it's very offensive as a person who is the president of Mile High Farmers and being spoken to in those ways, being the national policy rep. for Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, seeing my own colleagues and people I've sat across the table engaging in rhetoric like that. And it very much feels for us as Black and brown people that perhaps we just engage back in the rhetoric, and your skin must be a certain tone of paleness to qualify in that world of what they say is farming. And certainly our narratives about farming is completely different than a dominant narrative of what a farmer is, who a farmer is. That's very Eurocentric. Our peoples have been pushed off this land, and we're trying to make our way back as well. So just last thing I would say about farm workers is that the difference between those of us who are making it to have our own farms is just an issue of access. This bill seems like it's only focused on immigrant communities, but the reality is that many people who are trying to enter farming can't do it because it's not sustainable, because you're not paid enough. And it's not realistic to say, let's have apprenticeships where we trade you food and you just come out here and you're beholden in this rural community. That doesn't work for women, and that doesn't work for BIPOC communities for many reasons. So little bit about that. Happy to answer questions. I hope I didn't talk too fast, but wanted to fit in as much as I could for you all.
Thank you so much, Fatima. That was really amazing. We had a question already come in from Dina, and it was a question about charging more money for food so it's not a race to the bottom. Before we get to that, I just wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit. Something that we've heard a lot about is some of the resistance to this legislation. You know, the way that you explained it, these are really basic human rights, and labor protections that workers in many other industries have. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about some of the resistance, where that's coming from, and why this bill still really needs to move forward in spite of that.
Can you repeat the crux of the question there?
Yeah, the basic of the question was just, the way that this bill is outlined and what you just described to us, these are basic human rights, basic labor protections. So what is the resistance? Like, what is really at the heart of the resistance to passing this? And why aren't more organizations on board?
It's a question I ask myself all the time, just as a human, but I think this actually ties into Dina, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, question as well. The arguments against it is an economic argument. People, it's interesting because the data on the exploitation, the stories, all of that doesn't carry weight. We can argue within the economics, and I'll get to that, but I also want to say that there's a whole counter set of things that have value as well that are being proposed here in terms of just equity and basic human rights that seem like they can be very easily discounted by people, and feels like a very common thing, especially in environment. Economically, the arguments are that this is a kind of zero-sum game. And if we are, that for ag workers to make more, then farmers are going to make less. And there can be truth to that. The fact is that farmers make very little money. Farming, the biggest crisis for farming is that, the average age is 65. Nobody wants to do this work. The only growing group of landowners are Latinx people. Right? So even this bill, even that, creating pathways for people who are actually willing to do this work, you would think would be an important thing in terms of our future food system. So I think that, economically, there's arguments about how if you're taking that money away, you're going to really hurt these communities. I find those kind of really offensive things to say, because what that argument does is it acts as if those people who make up these communities in rural environments, right? So if you think of Olathe corn, or oftentimes when we talk about the urban-rural divide, we're very much talking about the rural divide as a white imaginative, and that's not the reality. Ag workers are out there, they make up these communities. So if you think of somewhere like our famous sweet Olathe corn, that town itself is over 70% Latinx people. right? So it's missing economic arguments of, being able to recognize that when you invest in the people who make up communities, then there's going to be value that increases in that economy as well. It's not only farmers who are spending in those communities. Furthermore, the cost of these health effects and so many of the things that these ag workers do deal with, there is a cost of it, and we bear that as taxpayers. So I think there's two separate arguments here. On the one side, farmers make too little money. That's true. On the other side, exploitation of ag workers should not be the answer. And also because they come from other places or look like people like me, it shouldn't be easier or easier to make those kinds of arguments in people's face when we see the realities. What they would say consistently in their arguments are, I asked my ag worker, they're happy. They love it. We're like a family. I'm like, so you think that like they just don't want minimum wage? And to me, what that really reminds me of is happy slave narratives, right? And so I find that absurd because no matter how much data or accounting of their stories we have, it's very much dismissed by just saying, from our perspective, they're happy. So, to go on to the point of what Dina had asked, I think it's important to recognize that in the entire world, the United States pays the least amount of money on food. So we pay about 7% of income on average. If you are more economically disenfranchised, then it's going to be higher, of course, on average. And that's problematic. We do pay a lot of money on rent and housing. And even in this food crisis, in this pandemic, we see that, people will skip meals and go hungry to pay their rent. That's a reality. So when we look at countries in Europe, they could be upwards of 30% of income. In places like Ethiopia, in certain East African countries, and other places in the world, it could be upwards of 70% of income. So in Ethiopia, for example, a lot of how we measure like the economy at any given moment is the price of a pound of our indigenous grain. We'll say, whoa, how much is TAFE right now? How much is it then? Because we allocate our money towards food in that way. So one of the interesting and much more interesting conversations I've heard coming out of this is, the fact that people will say farmers are price takers. We're kind of the only industry or business that doesn't get to set our own prices, right? They're set in a market and it has to do with a lot of different factors. And so we're price takers, not price makers, right? It's not like I have to pay my worker more, therefore I can just increase the cost of food, which some people were arguing in the Senate today. And it's like, that's not how it works. I wish it was, and then we would have been doing that for a while. But the reality is that we're not price makers. And for myself as a farmer advocate, that's the type of stuff that I work on, is trying to figure out how we can generate more money. And a lot of it just has to do with a general disrespect of the whole vocation and what it means. And I think that one big thing the pandemic showed us is how important, this work is. And for the first time ever, even for us, like we had, the year before, I was able to at least get out like 40 CSAs and I had to do all markets. And then when the pandemic hit, I had a demand of over 300 CSA shares. And so we're hoping that memory still stays alive, and that people, really recognize the importance of workers in that way. And we recognize that serious changes have to be made. But I'll tell you why this is a very contentious bill is, I think, for farmers, because doesn't feel good. We know that that's a reality. You can't really argue about the fact that they're not getting overtime. You can't really argue about the fact that sheep herders make so little money. You can argue about your own economics. I would say it's important to recognize that 60% of farmers are receiving and work off farm to make their income. So there's a lot in that economic stuff, but what I would say is that I think it's really sad, and even working on this bill, even for the tax I've received myself as a person, my promoters across the state, it's sad because farmers are forced within that system to be the kind of blunt arm of oppression.
Thank you very much for that. That was just an incredible statement and perspective to hear. I really appreciate it. I know that there are a couple more chats coming in or questions coming in, and please feel free to keep posting those in the chat. And if we have time to get to them, we will. But I really want to move through to our action items, which our team has been updating rapidly as Fatima has been talking, because the bill actually went through the second reading in the Senate today. And so while we had a bunch of action items around emailing your senators, we're now going to move on to targeting House members. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to give you guys all a toolkit right now. So we'll put that in the chat, and we're just going to move through these action items together and like start emailing people and posting on social media. So here we go. Let's see. I will drop the link first. So everyone grab this toolkit. It's going to have all the information that you need to move through the rest of the night. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, does everyone see that? So we've been kind of moving our action items around here. So this is actually going to be action 1, but we are going to be targeting senators and House members, but specifically House members. And that is because, as I said, we're really confident that it's going to pass out of the Senate. So we have a list here of the key legislators that we want you to target. So all you're going to do is you'll click a sample letter or a fact sheet if you want a little bit more reference. And you can either draft an email on your own asking for support, or you can use a sample letter, and you're just going to copy and paste these email addresses into new emails and start sending these letters. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to come off chat if you have, or mute if you have questions.
When you put the emails in, you can just put them into the BCC section and then just write "Dear Representative." That way you don't have to send an email out to every single person. It'll save you a little bit of time.
Thanks, Jessica. That's really helpful. And I'm going to be doing this with you guys, so I'll keep this up on my screen, but if it's interrupted by my emails, I apologize.
And also just letting you know, the really awesome email templates, they have kind of different perspectives you can take. So if you want to come from like a immigrant rights perspective or healthcare perspective, or just like a general email, you can choose whatever speaks to you most.
I'm happy to answer any questions of any kind while some of you are writing. So if there's anything you want to ask, please feel free to. Even if it's not just about this bill.
Thanks, Fatima. And if anyone has any questions about this process of emailing or is having any technical difficulties, definitely speak up too. I'm happy to help with that as well.
So this is Shannon from Spirit of the Sun. Hi, everyone. Hi, Fatima. I just wanted to know, so am I getting the links off the chat or I'm not sure what we're doing. I'm trying to follow and catch up with everyone. I just got on about a few minutes ago, hopped on the call. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, you're going to grab the link that's in the chat. Jessica or Rebecca, could someone repost it real quick just because I'm screen sharing? I'm having difficulty navigating it. But the link in the chat, so we're on action item 1. And so what we're doing, originally we're going to be targeting senators, but because the bill is likely to pass through the Senate, we're targeting House members. And so pretty much you can grab a sample letter from this linked document that's on here. I'm sharing my screen, so hopefully you can see that right now, the sample letter. And then you'll just copy and paste these email addresses and send out a letter. And of course, you can always write your own letter if you prefer. The sample letter is just inspiration. Okay. And then we'll move on to action 2. So I'll give it another minute and then we'll move on.
Awesome, thank you. And are you guys sending out the link to the recording of this? Because I missed like 45 minutes of the first. I'm so sorry.
No worries at all. Yeah, we will. We definitely have recorded this, and I will definitely send it to anyone who registered and whose email I have. And I'll also post it on our Facebook. But if for some reason you don't access it, just email me and I'll send it right to you.
Okay, and where on Facebook, if we're sharing it, is it 350.org or who or
no,
where?
it's through it's through 350's Regenerative Ag and Local Food Committee specifically.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course. And that's a really terrible term. Okay, how's everyone doing? Is everyone feeling ready to move on to action item 2? This is, of course, something that if you don't get through right now, you can do later. We do have a little homework section for you guys, so you can always do it then. So let's go ahead and move to action 2. Jessica, do you want to do this one?
Sure, yeah. So this next step is if you're active on social media, to post about the bill. There is this linked media toolkit and has a lot of really helpful sample messaging and also some really powerful graphics. So you're more than welcome to share those and just use it on your preferred social media platform. We're working on adding some of the representatives like the handles, but you also can you don't have to include the handles if you don't want to, but if there is like I think probably the 2 most important ones would be Representative Esgar and Representative Garnett. So if you are to tag those 2 folks, that would be really great. And feel free to, once you've made a post, if you want to share the link to your Twitter post or wherever into the chat, that way we can all reshare each other's as well.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Are these things we should add to our letter?
So we put a pause on the emails right now. Right now we're moving to social media. If you don't have social media, you could continue your work on the emails.
No, I have social media. So should I download these copies?
Yeah, exactly. So you can
cool.
share one of these images or or some of the text.
That's good because I just did. While Fatima was talking, I did.
Oh, look at that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I had missed some of my posts today. How can I download these?
I think
if you oh yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jessica.
No, go ahead, Michaela.
I was just gonna say for me, I just right clicked it and then there was an option to download it.
Oh, okay, right click, thank you. Somehow that's not working for me. I don't know why.
Also, if you're sharing on Facebook, you can share one of these graphics and then you can link.
I know. Well, how can I download them to my?
So
because I couldn't right click. They're yours. Yeah, you can do that on your end, but how can I?
Oh, so she's just sharing her screen, so you can't copy and paste anything from being shared. So you'll have to go to in the toolkit. It under action item 2, it says, it says,
here, I'll share
this helpful media toolkit. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah.
And so you'll be able to save, so you'll be able to save the images from that media toolkit.
Okay, that's perfect. I'll just do it that way. It's just easier.
So that link there has it. But yeah, if you're sharing a graphic on Facebook, you can, with that picture, you can share the link to, the document that has all these steps so people can do it too. Would be helpful. Cool.
Funny.
How's everyone doing right now at this point? Does everyone need another minute or we feel good to move on? You can just come off mute and tell me if you need a minute if you do.
I'm good.
Okay, everyone feeling good. Awesome. Cool. We are cruising through. All right. So for our third action, this is just going to be ongoing homework that we encourage you to do. So there's a lot on here, so you're going to have to read through it on your own as well as tonight. But if you even take, 20 minutes after this call to just go through the rest of this, it could really make a big difference. So different things that you can do include writing a letter to the editor in support of the Agricultural Workers' Rights Bill or one of the other bills that we mentioned earlier in the call tonight. Continue emailing and calling your legislators. This bill is going to be moving through the House committee, so really putting the pressure on those House committee members is critical. And then keep speaking up about agricultural workers' rights. Talk to your friends about it. Talk to your neighbors about it. Be conscious in the choices that you make with food. It's a really important issue, and it can be easy to take action tonight and then forget about it the rest of the time. So For some ongoing homework actions specifically related to SB 2187, that's the Ag Workers' Rights Bill. Governor Polis has recently declared his support for the bill, which we are thrilled about. So you can quickly send him a note, and we have linked to a support letter here. So it really just says, thank you so much for your support. We hope that you'll be a little bit more vocal about this and continue talking about it. And it's just really important when we get positive feedback from our representatives to let them know that it matters to us. The other thing that's going on that's pretty exciting is there will be a lobby day and a press conference tomorrow, Thursday. I think it starts fairly early. Fatima probably knows. I think it starts around 8:30 in the morning, but I did link here to it. So check that out. We included a guide for writing an op-ed if you want to do that. And then there's this targeted list of state reps, senators that we can thank for their support, and then an e-letter as well. So a lot of really easy one-click options here. And then I know this is a lot, guys. Sorry, I know we're asking for a lot, but I just wanted to remind everyone that in addition to the Agricultural Rights Bill, we also do have these other really important bills, the Soil Health Program, the Agricultural Drought and Climate Resilience Office, and then that stimulus funding. So we've also linked to phone numbers and emails, and you can get more info and write a similar letter to support following these links. All right, I'm going to stop my share. I know that was like an overwhelming amount of information. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any last questions for Fatima? Oh, good. And she put in the chat that it starts at 8:30. And then the press conference will be at 12:30. So Fatima, is that at the Capitol or is it virtual? Can you provide a few more details on that?
Yeah, it's at the Capitol. The morning is like lobbying. So you would go and talk to your own reps there. And then at 12:30 is going to be just an awesome ceremony. Shannon Francis, Spirit of the Sun, my people here today and always there for us, will also be there. And we'll have some farm workers speaking and things like that for about an hour, and some of our sponsors. So we're trying to get a big group out there just to kind of be loud and represent ourselves. So come if you can. If not, watch online. I'll try to send you the link, Michaela. I don't know that that's up yet, but I'll ask for it after we get off of this, and I'll send you some follow-up things this evening.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome. Well, I know this was a really information heavy webinar tonight, but I just want to thank you all for coming out and supporting this work. I mean, it is just so critical to be supporting local food systems and local food workers. So thank you for making the time tonight. And I hope you'll continue staying active, and feel free to share this toolkit with anyone else too who you think might be interested. And thank you so much, of course, to Fatima. Like, we couldn't have done this without you, and your work on the Ag Workers' Rights Bill is invaluable. And thank you to Jessica and to Rebecca as well, and all of their work on this tonight.
And thank you guys. We wouldn't know anything if you weren't around to help us.
Thank you. So glad everyone's
welcome. Trust me. As soon as my website's done, I'm going to get a lot more